Elena Santos pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of life growing inside her. 3 months along, and she still hadn't found the right moment to tell her husband, Daniel. Their marriage had been a whirlwind. She had fallen for the hard-working single father of a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. Daniel had seemed like everything she had ever wanted. He was devoted, strong, and tender. He had told her she was his second chance at love. But lately, something had shifted. He came home late. His phone was always face down on the counter. And her best friend, Megan, had become strangely distant. Elena tried to brush it off. She told herself she was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones, she reasoned. Nothing more. Elena worked as a part-time librarian in their small town of Cedar Mill. She loved the quiet rhythm of shelving books and helping children pick out stories. Her co-worker, Ruth, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude, had become like a second mother to her. Ruth watched Elena one afternoon as she stacked picture books with trembling hands. "Something is eating you alive, girl," Ruth said, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. "You have been walking around here like a ghost for 2 weeks." Elena forced a smile. "I am fine, Ruth. Just tired." Ruth narrowed her eyes. Tired does not make a woman look like she is about to shatter. "But I will not push. When you are ready to talk, I am right here." Elena nodded and turned away before Ruth could see the tears forming in her eyes. At home, Lily was the only bright spot. The little girl had attached herself to Elena from the very beginning. She had curly brown hair, big hazel eyes, and a laugh that could fill an entire room. She called Elena Mama Elena, and every time she said it, Elena felt her heart crack open with love. "Mama Elena, will you read me a story tonight?" Lily asked, tugging at Elena's sleeve as she prepared dinner. "Of course, sweetheart. Which one do you want?" "The one about the Moon Princess." Elena smiled and kissed the top of Lily's head. "The Moon Princess it is." Daniel came home late again that night. He barely looked at Elena as he walked through the door. He kissed Lily on the forehead, grabbed a plate of food, and disappeared into his office. Elena stood in the hallway, listening to the muffled sound of his voice behind the closed door. He was laughing. Softly. The way he used to laugh with her. She pressed her ear to the door and heard just enough. "I know, Meg. I know. Soon. I promise." Her blood turned to ice. Megan. Meg. Her best friend since college. The woman who had thrown her bridal shower. The woman who had held her hand when her mother died. The woman who had stood beside her at the altar and smiled while Elena said her vows. Elena backed away from the door and walked to the bathroom on numb legs. She locked the door, sat on the cold tile floor, and pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. The next morning, she called Megan. "Hey, Elena. How are you?" Megan's voice was bright and cheerful, as if nothing in the world was wrong. "I am good," Elena lied. "I was thinking we could get lunch today. It has been a while." There was a pause. Just a fraction of a second too long. "Oh, I would love to, but I have a work thing." "Rain check?" "Sure," Elena said. "Rain check." She hung up and stared at the phone in her hand. Megan had not had a real job in months. She had been freelancing, which mostly meant posting on social media and going to yoga classes. There was no work thing. Elena knew. She knew with every fiber of her being. But knowing and accepting are two very different things. It was Ruth who finally helped her face the truth. And Elena told her everything. The late nights. The whispered phone calls. The way Daniel flinched when she tried to touch him. The way Megan had disappeared from her life like smoke. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "I am going to tell you something my mother told me," Ruth said. "When someone shows you who they are, you believe them. You do not make excuses. You do not beg. You believe them and you act accordingly. But I am pregnant, Ruth. I have not even told him yet." Ruth's eyes widened. Then they softened. "Oh, honey. That changes things. But it does not change the truth." Elena wiped her eyes. "What do I do?" "You wait. You watch. And when the time comes, you protect yourself and that baby. That is what you do." The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening in October. The leaves outside were turning gold and red, and the air smelled like wood smoke and apples. It should have been a beautiful night. Daniel sat across from Elena at the kitchen table. Lily was at a neighbor's house for a playdate. Daniel's jaw was tight. His eyes would not meet hers. "I want a divorce, Elena." The words fell like stones into still water. "What?" she whispered, even though she already knew. "I have been seeing someone. It is Megan." Elena stared at him. She waited for the explosion of anger, the scream that she had been holding inside for weeks. But it did not come. Instead, there was only a deep, heavy silence, like the moment before a storm breaks. "How long?" she asked. 6 months. 6 months. Half of their marriage. He had been lying to her for half of their entire marriage. "Do you love her?" Elena asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. "I think so. Yes." Elena wanted to tell him about the baby. The words were right there on the tip of her tongue. But something stopped her. A voice inside her, quiet but firm, said no. "Do not use this child as a rope to tie a man who wants to leave. Do not give him a reason to stay out of guilt. If he does not want you, he does not deserve to know. Not yet. Not like this." "Fine," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I will sign the papers." Daniel looked surprised. He had clearly expected a fight. Maybe even hoped for one, so he could feel justified in leaving. "Elena, I am sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "People always say that," she said. "And it is never true." The divorce moved quickly. Daniel was eager. Megan was eager. They wanted to start their new life together. Elena moved out of the house she had helped turn into a home. She took nothing but her clothes, a few books, and the necklace her mother had given her before she died, a simple gold chain with a small crescent moon pendant. The hardest part was Lily. On the last day, Elena knelt down in the driveway and held the little girl who had become her daughter in every way that mattered. "I do not want you to go, Mama Elena," Lily sobbed, her small arms wrapped around Elena's neck. "Please do not go. I will be good. I promise I will be good." Elena's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Listen to me, Lily. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. And I will always, always love you. Do you understand?" Lily nodded, tears streaming down her round cheeks. Elena kissed her forehead and stood up. She walked to her car without looking back because she knew that if she looked back, she would never leave. She drove to a motel on the edge of town, checked into a room that smelled like mildew and regret, and sat on the bed with her hands on her stomach. "It is just you and me now," she whispered to the life inside her. "But I promise you, we are going to be okay." Ruth came the next day with groceries, clean towels, and a thermos of hot soup. "You are not staying in this dump," Ruth said, looking around the motel room with disgust. "You are coming to stay with me until you figure out your next move." "Ruth, I cannot ask you to do that." "You did not ask. I am telling you. Pack your bag." Elena moved into Ruth's small cottage on Elm Street. Ruth had a spare bedroom with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a window that overlooked a garden full of roses. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for Elena in months. Ruth also introduced Elena to her nephew, James, a young attorney who handled family law. James was tall and earnest with wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of tapping his pen against his notepad when he was thinking. "You need to establish your rights regarding the pregnancy," James told her over coffee at Ruth's kitchen table. "Even if you do not want Daniel involved right now, you should have everything documented." "I do not want anything from him," Elena said firmly. James nodded slowly. "I understand. But let me at least keep your options open. You never know what the future holds." He had no idea how right he was. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. It had been forwarded from Elena's old address to Ruth's cottage. The envelope was thick cream-colored paper with a Portuguese law firm's letterhead embossed in gold. Elena opened it at the kitchen table while Ruth poured tea. "Dear Ms. Elena Maria Santos, we regret to inform you of the passing of your maternal grandmother, Dona Isabel Ferreira de Souza, on the 14th of June. After an extensive search, we have confirmed that you are her sole surviving heir. As such, you are entitled to her full estate, including the property known as Quinta de Lua, a 200-acre vineyard estate in the Douro Valley region of Portugal, as well as all associated financial holdings, investments, and personal property totaling approximately €4.7 million. We respectfully request your presence in Porto at your earliest convenience to finalize the transfer of assets. Please contact our offices to arrange a meeting. Yours sincerely, Mr. Antonio Carvalho, Attorney at Law." Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down on the table and stared at it as if it might burst into flames. "What is it?" Ruth asked, setting down the teapot. "My grandmother," Elena said slowly. "My mother's mother. A woman I have never met. She left me everything." Ruth picked up the letter and read it. Her eyes grew wider with each line. When she finished, she set it down and looked at Elena. "Well," Ruth said, a smile spreading across her face. "It seems like the universe has a sense of timing after all." Elena laughed. It was the first real laugh she had let out in months, and it felt strange and wonderful, like stretching a muscle she had forgotten she had. She called Mr. Carvalho the next day. He was a warm, elderly man with a gentle voice and a slight accent that reminded Elena of her mother. "Your grandmother never stopped looking for your mother," he told her. "When your mother left Portugal, she cut all ties. She cut all ties. She changed her name. She disappeared. Isabel spent years searching. When she finally learned that your mother had passed away, she turned her search to you. She rewrote her will 2 years before her own death. She wanted everything to go to you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Why did my mother leave?" Mr. Carvalho was quiet for a moment. "That is a story best told in person, Miss Santos. There is much you do not know about your family. Will you come to Portugal?" Elena looked around Ruth's cozy kitchen. She looked down at her growing belly. She thought about the motel room. The empty bank account. The husband who had thrown her away. "Yes," she said. "I will come." Ruth drove her to the airport. At the gate, the older woman pulled Elena into a fierce hug. "You go find out who you really are," Ruth said. "And you come back and tell me everything." "What if I do not come back?" Elena asked softly. Ruth held her at arm's length and studied her face. "Then I will come visit you in Portugal and drink your wine." Elena landed in Porto on a rainy morning in November. Mr. Carvalho met her at the airport, a small, dignified man in a well-tailored suit with kind eyes behind round spectacles. With him was a woman named Sofia, his assistant, a young Portuguese woman with dark curly hair and a warm, easy smile. "Welcome to Portugal, Ms. Santos," Sofia said, taking Elena's bag. "Or should I say, welcome home." They drove through the rain-soaked countryside toward the Douro Valley. As the city gave way to rolling green hills and terraced vineyards, Elena pressed her face to the car window and felt something stir inside her. Not the baby. Something deeper. Something older. Recognition. She had never been here before, but somehow, the landscape felt familiar. The red-roofed villages. The silver river winding through the valley. The ancient stone walls lining the roads. It was as if her blood remembered this place even though her mind did not. They arrived at Quinta da Lua in the late afternoon. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting golden light over the estate. Elena stepped out of the car and stared. The manor house was made of weathered stone, covered in ivy that had turned crimson with autumn. A wide terrace overlooked the vineyard, which stretched in neat rows down the hillside to the river below. Behind the house, a garden had gone slightly wild, with overgrown roses and lavender bushes that still held their fragrance despite the season. A stone fountain stood in the center of the courtyard, carved with crescent moons. "Quinta da Lua," Mr. Carvalho said softly. "The estate of the moon. Your grandmother named it after a lullaby her own mother used to sing. She said the moonlight over the Douro was the most beautiful thing in the world." Elena touched the stone wall of the manor house. It was warm from the sun. She felt tears on her cheeks but did not bother to wipe them away. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Inside, the house was filled with antique furniture, family photographs, and shelves of books in Portuguese. There were paintings of the vineyard in different seasons. There was a grand piano in the sitting room with sheet music still open on the stand. And everywhere, there were moons. Carved into the woodwork. Embroidered on the curtains. Painted on the tiles in the kitchen. Mr. Carvalho showed her a photograph on the mantelpiece. A woman with silver hair and Elena's own dark eyes stood in the vineyard, smiling at the camera. "Your grandmother," he said. "Dona Isabel. She was extraordinary. She ran this vineyard alone for 40 years after her husband died. She was one of the most respected winemakers in the region. And she never gave up hope that she would find you." Elena held the photograph and traced her grandmother's face with her fingertip. "I wish I had known her," she said. "She knew you," Mr. Carvalho replied. "She followed your life from a distance once she found you. She knew about your work at the library. She knew about your marriage. She even knew about the divorce. She died knowing you would come here one day." That night, Elena sat on the terrace wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the vineyard under a sky full of stars. The moon hung low and full over the river, casting silver light across the water. She understood now why her grandmother had named this place Quinta da Lua. The moonlight here was unlike anything she had ever seen. It did not just illuminate the landscape. It transformed it. Everything was silver and shadow, ancient and new, heartbreaking and hopeful all at once. She placed her hands on her belly. "We are home, little one." The next morning, she met Marco Oliveira. He was already in the vineyard when she came outside, walking between the rows of vines with a pair of pruning shears and a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, sun-browned skin, and eyes the color of chestnuts. His hands were rough and calloused, the hands of a man who knew the earth. He stopped when he saw her and removed his hat. "You must be Elena," he said. His English was accented but clear. "I am Marco. I was your grandmother's vineyard manager. I have been taking care of the property since she passed." "Thank you for staying," Elena said. "The vineyard looks wonderful." Marco nodded, but his expression was guarded. "Your grandmother loved this place more than anything. I stayed because I made her a promise that I would keep it alive until her family came. And here I am," Elena said. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then something in his expression softened, just slightly. "Here you are. Over the following weeks, Elena and Marco worked side by side in the vineyard. He taught her about the grapes, the soil, the seasons. He showed her how to read the weather by watching the clouds over the river. He told her about her grandmother, the stories that Mr. Carvalho had not known. How Dona Isabel would sing to the vines during harvest. How she kept a journal of every vintage, every season, every sunset. How she used to sit on this very terrace and talk to the moon as if it were an old friend. She would have loved you, Marco said one evening as they sat together on the terrace after a long day of pruning. You think so? I know so. You have her eyes. And her stubbornness. Elena laughed. Is that a compliment? Marco smiled, and it changed his entire face. The guarded, serious man she had first met disappeared, replaced by someone warm and open and real. In this family, stubbornness is the highest compliment. Elena also grew close to Sofia, Mr. Carvalho's assistant, who quickly became a friend. Sofia was a few years younger than Elena, unmarried, and fiercely independent. She had grown up in a small village nearby and had worked her way through law school on scholarships and sheer determination. You and I are the same, Sofia told her one afternoon over coffee in the village. Women who had to build themselves from nothing. That is why I like you. I did not build myself, Elena said. I inherited a fortune. Sofia shook her head. Money is not what I am talking about. I am talking about surviving. You walked away from a man who betrayed you. You did not beg. You did not break. That is strength, Elena. The vineyard is just a bonus. Elena also met Fernanda, the estate's longtime housekeeper, a stout, fierce woman in her 70s who had worked for Dona Isabel for decades. Fernanda had iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, a voice that could peel paint, and a heart the size of the Douro Valley. So you are the granddaughter, Fernanda said on their first meeting, looking Elena up and down with sharp eyes. You are too thin. And pregnant. Sit down. I am making soup. Elena sat down. She learned quickly that arguing with Fernanda was like arguing with a mountain. Fernanda became Elena's fierce protector. She cooked elaborate meals, fussed over Elena's health, and told her stories about Dona Isabel that made Elena laugh and cry in equal measure. Your grandmother was the strongest woman I ever knew, Fernanda told her one evening while kneading bread. When her husband died, everyone said she should sell the estate. A woman cannot run a vineyard alone, they said. She told them all to go to hell. Politely, of course. She was always polite. But she meant it. Elena smiled. I think I would have liked her very much. You are her, Fernanda said simply. You just do not know it yet. As the weeks turned into months, Elena transformed. The haunted, hollow-eyed woman who had arrived in Portugal began to disappear. In her place stood someone stronger, calmer, more certain of herself. She learned Portuguese. She studied winemaking. She restored the garden. She repaired the fountain. She read her grandmother's journals and felt connected to a lineage of strong women she had never known existed. Her mother's story emerged slowly, told in fragments by Mr. Carvalho, Fernanda, an